Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Megan Dutta from Systems Contractor News, and first of all, I want to thank Shure for these awesome headphones. Be sure to check out their booth and learn more about their products. Let's introduce our panelists. Let's start out with Sheuli. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, I'm honored to be here. My name is Sheuli Forte. I work for Willis Towers Watson, and I am a global platform lead for workplace technology, which means that I'm kind of in charge of everything related to AV in our meeting spaces, and that's why I'm really glad to be here to hear what's going on in this world as it is today.
And Jason, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Jason Vossler. I work for Dell Technologies, and I'm one of the product line managers that's responsible for our large displays and also our meeting space solutions offering. And really, we run and manage our go-to-market efforts across North America. So look forward to speaking with everybody today.
Troy?
Jensen, Senior Manager Global Accounts with Shure. And I work with large enterprise accounts around the globe and introduce them to our products and assist with application of our products and applying our products to their global standards.
And last but not least, Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Caldera with Pearl Technology. I'm Senior Vice President of Audiovisual Technology, and we're just a large-scale systems integrator.
We're so happy to have all of you here. And for the attendees, thanks for joining us. Be sure to keep it active in the chat. We love to interact with you and have you help us steer this conversation. And if you have any official questions, drop them in the Q&A link. Let's start off with something everybody can't stop talking about, working from home. Do we think that's here to stay? Is that the new normal? Sheuli, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be the H word, hybrid. You know, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to continue the pattern of working from home because now they know that they're able to be just as, if not more productive when they're working remotely. But then there will also be the need to go back into the office when, you know, you want that collaborative experience with people in the office as well as with other locations. So I think that's one of the reasons why meeting spaces are going to be getting a lot more attention and why the technology, the AV technology in the room just needs to be up to speed, up to par, to be able to give that experience for the people who are working from home, the same type of immersive experience that somebody sitting in the room would get. So I do think work from home is going to continue, but I do think that a lot of people are going to be, you know, splitting up their week more. Like I, for one, definitely plan to go in 1 or 2 days a week, but still be able to work from home. So that's kind of what I see.
Flex work schedules were already a thing pre-pandemic. If the pandemic has done anything, it's cemented it into people's lifestyles. Most people are looking forward to the H word, some sort of hybrid model. Employers are walking a little bit of a tightrope between demanding that they return to work full-time and retaining employees. A recent study showed that just over a third would change employers if they were demanded to return to work full-time and weren't afforded some sort of remote work option. So definitely building in the value to returning to work, creating a flexible environment at work. I've seen companies like Google up their game a little bit with some of the flexible workspaces, a glamping sort of motif where you can work outside, a tent type structure that's fully fitted out and has all of the technology built into the tent, Wi-Fi, even video conferencing, the visible partitions. Hoteling is going to be a big thing, you know, certainly with all this flexible work schedule. Employers are not going to have dedicated desks for employees, most likely. You'll come into a flex space and some hoteling will have to be applied. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's a definite thing. Is that 1 day a week in the office or full 5 days a week in the office? I think that depends on the employer and what type of work that particular enterprise is doing.
Right, and very similar to the hoteling idea, I guess you could say for a company like ours, you know, we also have to work with our clients, right? And that's one of the things, a lot of face-to-face demos and meetings are required with clients. And we have several locations that have client suites that are, you know, made up a little bit better with the AV technology so that any of the demo work or anything like that that's done you know, they have a better experience with it. And then there's the concept of experience centers. Like we just opened one up in New York City overlooking Bryant Park that has, a lot of the, state-of-the-art type of rooms, where one of the rooms, as Troy mentioned, is like a divisible space, right? It's got the 3 smaller rooms that can all be used as individual meeting spaces, or you open them up and it becomes like almost like a town hall type of setting. And it has, it can also give you the experience where the people in the room are getting the full immersive experience, but then you have the cameras that can track you, to basically focus in on whoever is speaking. So I think from that standpoint, people working from home, in order for them to be able to get that experience, they want to be able to, see well who's speaking and get that type of like, so that you can read the facial expressions like I'm able to now in this Zoom meeting, for example, and vice versa, for the people at home to see who's in the meeting room, and for them to be able to see it for the folks who are at home. So that type of technology is definitely going to get a lot more focus now.
Yeah, and Sheuli, you bring up a good point, right? So it's how do you create that in-person experience, right, virtually? And I think there's been some significant advancements, right? Whether it's around ease of use and starting the meeting and having confidence in bridging that gap, right, between remote employees and employees that are on site. But how do you take it to the next level, and kind of what's the future? Where does deep learning come in? Where does AI come into it? AR, VR, MR applications, really creating that entire immersive experience from a remote collaboration standpoint. I think that's the next evolution as well, kind of talking about some of the future spaces that you were just mentioning.
Yep. When you're talking about those, how are you personalizing those experiences, and what types of technology? I know you just mentioned like augmented reality, but what other things like facial tracking, screen versus projection, that kind of stuff?
Well, I think kind of you start at the core, right? So rock solid video and audio. But actually, if you take a step back, the number one key concern really is that user experience. So driving, I think, somewhat simple solutions. So the user interface has to be intuitive. The technology has to work, right? If I can't hear, then that's a big problem. If I can't see, especially in some type of a more immersive environment, that's a big problem as well. So the technology has to be rock solid, but I think the most important piece is that user experience. If the technology is not simple, especially in a group shared environment, most folks will not use it. That's just the reality of it. So a very simple user interface, and then the equipment has to work. It's key. That's where you need to start. And I think you could expand out from there, right? I mean, whether it's AR, VR, MR, whether it's AI to make the environment more a smarter environment, more intelligent environment. But again, I always go back to really keeping things simple at the end of the day. The solutions that are out there today really drive around simplicity. And I think that's really the key driver in a lot of these presentation spaces, especially in a group shared environment where you're catering to a lot of different folks with varying degrees of technology backgrounds.
I think one of the biggest problems that we're going to have, though, with user experience design or designing systems in general that can be rock solid. We can make the AV systems, and I'm speaking on behalf of an integrator, right? I deal with this every day with my clients, almost every day, and very large clients, where we'll put in a rock solid AV system. I still get a phone call. The thing is completely different and doesn't work. And it has nothing to do with the AV system that we put in. It has to do with X, Y, and Z software who just changed and updated some kind of app or something, right? Whether it's their room application, whether it's their just overall software. What's the layout of the buttons? How does it function? How does it work? And that's 100% out of the control of not only the end user, who's the person who's living through that experience, but me as the integrator who's being yelled at because said experience is now different today versus yesterday, right?
Right.
So I think there's a good management of expectations that has to happen. And I think that, it's that open communication that you have to have, right, with your client. And they have to have an understanding of that. And what I find is, the larger the corporation, right, IT staff, AV staff, all that kind of stuff, they have an understanding of that. They've got that tier 1 support team that will help explain that to the executives, right? But you get to your smaller organizations, I'm talking well outside the Fortune 500, right, which is your everyday 90% use case for what we do as integrators, right? Those are the small businesses. Those are the people that don't understand. And that's where that communication becomes key. I mean, it's key everywhere, but it's specifically key there as to what the expectation is from user experience design. And I think as long as you can set those parameters, with the technology that we have now, that work from home thing, like you said, the hybrid, it's here. It's going to stay. The pandemic has driven that. If the pandemic would have happened 5 years ago, we'd be having a totally different conversation right now, because even 5 years ago, I don't think we were as prepared as we were last year on the forefront of technology for video conferencing and audio conferencing. So, and at least having good quality products for video conferencing and audio conferencing.
Exactly. And a lot of it was on-prem back then, but now everybody's moving to software as a service. Things are moving into the cloud. And as Jeremy said, we're really at the mercy of the platform owners, right? Of, when things are changing. So as long as there's a long enough lead time between you and the service provider to say, okay, this is coming in the next week or two, or even longer, hopefully, so that you have time enough to train your end users, just to basically say, and I used this analogy the other day, it's like, imagine waking up in the morning and getting into your car, and you're used to touching the start engine button on the right side, but magically switch to the left side. That's going to totally mess up your day, right? So I mean, things like even just a smallest little change like that can really throw off our end users. As as I think Jason mentioned earlier, not every user is going to have the same level of technical expertise, right? So there has to be training, there has to be time to get them up to speed. You also have to make sure the documentation in the room is apt, for every person that's going to come in. And technology like QR-based instructions and things like that. When someone walks in with their mobile phone, if they can kind of scan a code and then everything they need to know about the room comes up on it, things like that are of interest to us. So how can we make the user experience as seamless as possible, right?
So you bring up a good point with QR codes. How are you guys making things touchless at a time when people don't want to touch anything? And Troy, I'll start with you.
Well, gesture-based control systems are one of the things people have been looking at. The problem is that they weren't prevalent prior to the pandemic. They're a little bit more complicated to put in, and they're a little bit more costly to put in. And I think people are a little hesitant to expend that money unless they have to. Funny thing with some of our products, we introduced a touch button literally right before the pandemic. And right as the pandemic hit, people's questions were, well, how do I clean that thing, right? So definitely health and safety is a concern. But to Jeremy's point earlier, I wanted to touch on the pandemic brought another thing to light, and that's the adoption of soft codecs. Prior to pandemic, there was a tier of large enterprise accounts who were fixed on hardware-based appliances and were very hesitant to move into a software-based or cloud environment. The pandemic flipped that switch overnight, and that was a key thing. So just definitely, Jeremy, and that brought now another level of complexity, because now all the IT departments had to figure out, one, to be Zoom support or MS Teams support remotely overnight. And then now they're moving back into the facilities, and they have to now take those platforms and build them in the larger rooms, where before they were relying on a hardware-based codec, perhaps. So yeah, it's all changed, but safety and health are a concern. That also speaks to what type of room you're going to push people into, right? Social distancing is still an issue. And are we going to be able to push people into smaller rooms, what we used to call huddle rooms? Will those 4 people who used to fit into a huddle room even be in the office at this point? So that the hybrid model, health concerns, whether it be social distancing or how do we manage cleanliness and remove the need to touch devices, BYOD devices. People will be more secure with maybe bringing their own device into a room and using that for control or dialing. Definitely issues. And we're still working through those as we speak, as we now just see people returning to the office.
Jason, how are you handling that with touch screens and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Megan. And I was actually going to jump in because this is such a near and dear topic, near and dear to my heart. It was interesting, right? I mean, with our large touch displays, as soon as the pandemic hit, of course, to your point, right, nobody wanted to touch anything. And that was really a top concern. Mine as well, owning the business. So that being said, we saw, as soon as the pandemic hit, of course, there was a lot of concern around it, a lot of cause for concern, rightfully so. And really the interest around touch displays completely dropped off. What we've seen here is really when the start to return to the classroom and return to work started to happen, is that folks really want to get back to normal. And there are a lot of, different things that you can do to minimize it, right? So like, for instance, you'll see a lot of voice activation and voice control, like you see at home, right, today with Alexa and other devices. That's going to start really making it into the presentation space and the corporate space as well. But that also opens up some unique security concerns there, right? And also privacy concerns. So really getting away from interacting with content on screen is not going away. In fact, the touch display market, if you've been trying to get a touch display lately, right, it's almost impossible. The reason being is just unprecedented demand. And a lot of that is being fueled by the need to be able to have that normalized meeting experience, right? Being able to draw on a whiteboard, on a chalkboard, but being able to digitize that and share that with a remote audience, either live in real time or be able to capture and save that information, be able to share it with an audience is critical. And how do you do that? A large screen touch display. So I don't think you're getting away from really interacting with content on surface, whether that be annotating, whether it be pinch pull zoom, right, and interacting with content in that fashion. But what you do see is really a difference in how people treat these spaces. So one example is the conference rooms, at least internally at Dell, they are cleaned multiple times a day. And this includes all the equipment in the space. Pre-pandemic, I could tell you that some of the displays probably were never wiped down, right? Folks are much more concerned about their personal hygiene, right? That's a huge benefit. Another benefit too, especially with some of the display technology, is that you can use like a passive stylus. So now everybody could have a passive stylus or their own personal stylus and not actually physically touch the display. So there's a lot of things I think you can do from a personal aspect or within your environment to minimize, right, some of the concerns around COVID and the virus and just personal hygiene in general, outside of, actually getting away from interacting with content on the surface. But it'll be a combination of both, right? I think you'll see the first thing is going to be voice control and voice applications in the space, which would eliminate the need, right, to be able to physically maybe start your meeting or touch a button to start a meeting. But I think at long term, you're still going to see, the need for touch displays is growing, which is great for our business, but in particular, just because of the pandemic, it's nice to see that interest hasn't went away and that folks are kind of going back to that normal and getting comfortable using technology.
So bringing up voice control.
I think. Oh. Go ahead.
Okay. Bringing up voice control is interesting to me because it's something we've been talking about. Like, I won't say which system I use because I don't want it to go off, but I control a lot of things in my house with it. And then, at work, you want to do that too. And we've been talking about that, but there's so many, it seems like, security concerns. So how do you handle that? And Jeremy, I'll throw that to you because I know you have some experience with that.
Well, there's a whole nother animal with voice control, right? And that, we've all known that the consumer market has driven the professional market for a long time, right? Since forever, right? So, only recently, I remember 10, 15 years ago, a voice control was like, oh, it's a cool movie thing, right? And then as we started growing and the algorithms got better and the way that just the internet works and how all these things work, it got really good. And we all have it in our home. Most of us have it in our home, right? The ones that aren't conspiracy theorists, right? So, we use it. It works well. Are we going to see that in the professional space anytime soon? I don't think so. I literally have nobody asking for it. Right? I have people inquiring about it, but no one asks for it, right? And I think that there's still a distrust for it, not from that conspiracy standpoint, but a distrust like you just said, Megan. I don't want to say it because I don't want it to go off, right? Inherently, voice recognition is there, but it's just general voice recognition. It's not specific person voice recognition or anything like that, which could cause other issues, right? And then on top of it, the question that you then brought up is the security concerns, right? I can guarantee you I have clients that will not allow anything like that on their network, right? I can't even get them to allow Android devices in general on their network, right? That's a difficult thing,
Open source.
There's just anything that's open source, it's just not allowed and we're going to see that be, at least in the short term, we're going to start to see that, I think, become stricter and more secure, because what's going to happen is, with all of the especially recent cybersecurity attacks, all of the hacking, all the stuff that's happening right now, that's where the new quote unquote warfare is happening, right? So there's a big lockdown from the corporate scale to start eliminating anything that could be potential risk, right? Things like that are potential risk. Love the idea, but touchscreens aren't going to go away anytime soon. Control touch panels not going to go away anytime soon. I love being able to walk in and plug a cable in and you get something up, or you walk in, the TV just turns on because it knows you're there. Connect wirelessly by going to here, you're only touching your user device, right? Makes it a little bit more complex when you want to start integrating conferencing and USB connectivity. Then you need a room PC, and it just, we can simplify these things so much and make that user experience great, but you're still going to have to touch something, right? We're nowhere near the point where that's, going to go away.
Yep, you're going to need to have multiple approaches as well, because I can tell you from experience that you're going to have different types of end user bases. Those who have no trouble walking in because they have an iPhone, so they know how to use the different apps on the phone. They'll walk in, and if they happen to have the app that can remotely control whatever system is in the room, they'll have no problem just starting the meeting. But then there are others who just can't be bothered with that. They just want to come into the room, look at the touch panel, see the join button on there, and just hit it, and they're on their meeting. To them, like even taking a few minutes to look on their phone or even look at instructions is too much for them because of the nature of their position. Maybe they just need to be able to walk in.
What's interesting is I've had people tell me that's a generational shift, right?
Yeah.
That as the workforce ages out and new people come in, that's going to change. I don't think that's true, right?
No. Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of people that I know that are significantly younger than me, and I'm not that old, right? Who still don't they don't know how to use an iPhone. They have an iPhone, they have no idea how to use it, right? They can make a call, like I said, a text message. That's it, right?
And that's the thing. You're going to have all sorts of users. So that's why you have to have those old school table talkers that actually are physically there where people can just quickly see how to do something. You have to have the option to be able to, for the people who are scared to touch anything, to walk in and have a QR code, right? And then you also have to have, I guess a touchless way as well, like I was just saying, using your phone as the control. So I think it's important to have that flexibility as well. Yes, it could increase costs a little bit, but you have to be able to cater to all of your user types and just make sure that the customer experience is top notch. To me, user experience is the most important thing.
So let's talk about the actual spaces in the office. Do you think that the pandemic is bringing about the death of the open floor plan, and how are huddle spaces changing?
That's a great question. I don't think it is the death of the open floor plan, to be honest. I really don't see them going back to assigning a desk to people, mainly because of the first point that we talked about, that people really aren't going to be coming into the office every day if they don't have to, right? So I think people are going to be coming more into the office for the collaboration needs. So collab booths, little areas where smaller groups can get together and, work together or on a small project, and yet do it in a way that they're not disturbing other people around them. I think working out the acoustics that way is going to be important. Figuring out how to create collab spaces in your office where everything is still, maybe some noise canceling technology is put in such a way that the sound stays within your area and doesn't really bother other people. Things like that would probably be very useful. And then for the agile workspace, as some offices have here, I think that will remain. There could be cases where somebody has 5 meetings that day and they want to do them all in person, but then they need to go find a desk to kind of squat at in between. I think the agile workspace is good for that. And I'm sure many corporations, I know at Willis Towers Watson we've for certain offices, we've implemented a desk booking tool where ahead of time you need to reserve a desk before you go in, so that at the time all COVID-19 restrictions and things like that could be met. But now, as those start to become lifted, as more and more people are vaccinated and the offices are open, and everybody can just go in locations where that's the case, then I think that will start to diminish, and the booking tool will probably not be used as much anymore, and people will be able to just use whatever's available. And that's where I wanted to interject earlier when we were talking about how to clean the touch screens. I was going to say that in an agile environment before all this started, that was already the norm. You would have, everybody was expected to clean their desk space. Anything that you touch that's common for everyone, like your keyboard, your mouse, anything that would be touched, it was common courtesy for you to wipe that with a wipe before you left, so that the next person that came in would have a nice clean desk space. So, there's a lot of good faith measures as well for people to continue in this type of environment.
Yeah, I think people have short-term memory as well. We didn't really carry forward all the lessons we learned from 100 years ago when we had the Spanish flu, right? So how long will it take before people forget COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know until the next pandemic, perhaps. But the cleanliness left to the responsibility of people. I think people are more conscious of the cleanliness issue now and the safety concerns. People will be asking about that. How often are these things cleaned? BYOD, I think, is definitely something people would be more comfortable with walking into a space. Is it the death of open office? It might be the death of the cubicle farm. We may see fewer cubicles and more of these flex spaces, which is going to require a little bit more creativity in the systems that we put in. But I don't see employers investing in more real estate than they have to now.
It's the death of commercial real estate.
Yeah.
That's what's been killed in this pandemic, right? And I've had people say that to me, like, less office space means less technology. It's the exact opposite. It's less office space that's more technologically advanced.
100% agree.
Technology.
Yep.
Yeah.
So will be our last question before we get to our Q&A. With more people working from home and kind of killing off the commercial real estate market, has that decreased AV budgets? Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Yes and no, right? So, I mean, it just depends on the end user and how they're, applying their new work from home strategies and things like that, right? Like I'm not getting a lot of customers that, you're working from home, so you're always doing video conferencing, you're always in some kind of call, right, throughout the day, because we're all accessible now. That whole unified communications idea we were all striving for years ago that we finally got into, which has led us through this pandemic, is here, right? So we need to do these video calls. The problem is, as much as we all know that it would be really awesome to have a super great microphone and camera and everything else at your desk, a lot of companies actually aren't going to make that investment, right? Some will, some won't, right? So we're going to see some quality there. It's just kind of all over the board, those people too, they're not going to buy that equipment from people like me, from integrators. They're going to, they're still going to rely on us for the office specialty work. Or if it's a VP in their home office, obviously they might put in something a little bit more technologically advanced. But I think right now I'm seeing an increase in potential budgets. So people wanting to start putting budgets together for 2021, 2022 and beyond. People are starting to realize that there are refresh cycles on this stuff more than they used to, which is good. And so we're seeing a lot of quotes going out, which is a good sign, obviously, right? But obviously we have to get these things approved. So I think from a management perspective on the larger scale operations, they're fighting the request of the IT team and the AV teams to increase the budgets. But if anything is showing us this past year, they need to do that, and they're starting to accept the fact they can do that. So I think there's really, really good things on the horizons for companies like ours, for the manufacturers as well. I will give one little jab to the manufacturers in that I just need them to keep up with the product so that I can sell it, right? I can sell it all day long. I just got to be able to put it in, which is a problem right now. I've got stuff on. I actually had a back order request come in from a manufacturer that said I wouldn't have my product till June of 2022. Right. So obviously I had to change it to something else, but that's a scary thought right there. Right. And I know there's
as the only manufacturer on this team, I'll defend that a little bit. There was a little chips shortage here that is affecting everything that gets built. Yeah.
The car lots are completely empty because of that. That's there's cardboard shortages that I'm hearing from people for shipping stuff. It's a snowball effect across the globe on every region and everything that we do. 100% agree. I'm just saying that no matter how big the budgets are, I can't do anything if I can't get the product, right? And I think that's gonna ramp back up. I think we're gonna start seeing that come back around here in the next 6 months or so. So
I can tell you guys the demand has been unprecedented from a display standpoint, right? So, and I think there's a number of different things that are driving it. It was everybody going home, right, and being stuck at home for a year. That certainly impacts the supply chain as far as glass is concerned and componentry. But now what we're seeing too, right, is that a lot of employers actually allowed their employees, Dell included, to take their workspace home, right? So let's use the monitor as an example. Well, now as people are returning back to the office, what do? Do you have those folks bring back all the equipment that they took home back to the office space, or do you leave that really for their personal setup and re-outfit the office in a new configuration? And from a display standpoint, the demand has just been unprecedented, right? Whether it was outfitting folks to work from home and now outfitting folks to return back to the workplace. So Jeremy, to your point, really from an IT budget standpoint, I think it's pocketed. But overall, at least from a display aspect, the amount of demand there has been unprecedented. But supply, right, is the issue, and has been and will be for next.
But again, it's not like you said, Troy. It's everything, right? I'm not, and surprisingly, you guys have been really good about getting me product, right? But a lot of manufacturers are not, and it's not just manufacturers. I literally went to go add onto the deck on the back of my house the other day, and I had a heart attack when I went to go buy the lumber, right? And I said, nope, next year. It's everything. It's literally everything. So.
I'm still waiting for an exhaust system to fix my wrecked car, and it's been over 2 weeks. So you're right, it is everywhere.
Yeah, budgets aren't going down, but definitely maybe cost per room is going down because they realize they need to activate more spaces, whether it's corporate or educational. So they're looking for more effective solutions per room as opposed to budgets going down. If anything, I would say budgets are going up, but the cost per room is going down.
Well, and we briefly talked about it too. I don't know if it was here or another panel I was on, but one of the things that we discussed was before there was presentation spaces, there was audio conferencing spaces, there was video conferencing spaces, right? That's not a thing anymore. Now it's just conference rooms.
That's right.
Doesn't matter if it's a huddle room. Huddle room is not a huddle room. It's just a small conference room. It's a big conference, whatever. They're conference spaces. By conference, I mean video, audio, presentation. All three. 100% of the time, that's it, right? Very rarely do I ever see, unless it's like 2 chairs at a table where you can use your webcam and your desktop speakers or something like that. Do I ever see just an HDMI and a TV, right? It's everything, right? So it is like the budgets are going to go up. Fortunately, the non-hardware based codecs have driven the cost of a lot of this stuff down and given the opportunity for companies like you guys, Troy, and other people to enhance what the quality of the product is that we're going to get for those software-based calls. So.
I'm going to add another aspect to that, though, of how some costs can offset each other. So there's also a lot of push for people's laptops to no longer be hard devices, but to be like, thin clients, right, where people can log into a VDI or something like that. So there's an opportunity for some companies to save costs in end user hardware that can then, they can focus that money more on the actual in-room meeting room spaces for where the real technology is needed. So just a thought, that could also be a pattern that happens for some companies that are moving towards what we call a flex environment, where people would, normally either come into the office and work from a thin client device or even from home with a thin client device. But then when they go into the office for either a client meeting or anything like that, they're looking for that big AV immersive experience when they walk into the office, right? So that's why I think that some companies...
No, you're exactly right. And it goes back to what we started this entire conversation with, right? When you do that, the system has to work.
Yes.
100% of the time, right?
Yes.
So when you're talking about costs and budgets, if the system works, I can sell the more expensive hardware any day of the week to a client, right? Because I can show them what their ROI is just from a conceptual standpoint, right? If you're coming into a room and it takes 10 minutes to start the meeting, it's a problem. Right. Because you've got all these people futzing with the technology and all these salaries that you're paying and all this lost productivity, right? If you put that productivity to a dollar number, right? And then you can get the room working in the first 4 minutes versus the first 10 minutes, that 6-minute differential it pays for itself 10 times over, right? So, but again, has to work, right?
Yep. Agreed.
So that whole it's a good place to end. We brought it full circle. Let's get into some of the Q&A questions. Do you run into security issues with AirPlay or Miracast?
Yes, 100%.
We run into security issues.
Either.
Yeah, we run into security issues, period, with everything these days. Just look around what's been in the news in the last few months, right? Any open port is an open door that somebody might be able to get through. So,
I'm getting to a point where I've got clients that have the USB ports in their laptops shut down. So when you come into a room and go to plug in USB to do video conferencing for the camera in the space, it doesn't work,
USB.
right?
Yep.
And then I'm getting yelled at. It has
Yep.
nothing to do with me. It has to do with the IT team turning off the USB port, right? So now that's another battle and a security battle. So it's not just
Mhm.
Miracast and the
Right.
other 100 wireless streaming devices that are out there, right? It's
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and you just got to deal with it. I mean, there's nothing you can really do but deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Mhm.
How far off do you think we are from the perfect voice recognition AI, like Star Trek computer style?
You know, a lot of people don't like the word recognition, would prefer detection. Recognition essentially connotes that it's identifying you as a person, and that
Mhm.
runs in the legal ramifications in certain parts of the globe where that's a big no-no. So detection is different than recognition.
That's what's going to prevent recognition from happening is the legal stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I think that we'll get there 6 years, 7 months. I don't know. I'm just going to pick a day, right? Whatever. It's at least 5 years from now, right? I think we're going to get there though, but I don't think we're going to get to use it.
Right. It's actually already out there. We just can't use it.
Do you think that this is the end of hard codecs such as Cisco and Polycom?
If I may, I would say that it really depends on the direction of the company and how much budget that you have. Obviously, that which is in your estate will remain there. I can attest to that because we still have some very old codecs in some areas that we're trying to work on upgrading as the budget and time allows. But I think that as new spaces are made out, I really do think people are going to move to the soft codecs. I don't really see. Especially with the new platforms that are out there, I really don't see the hard codecs being purchased as much anymore.
I personally think they're dead. I mean, they're going to have their niche uses, right? They're a reliable product that always worked great, assuming the IT team supported it, right? But what I'm seeing now is the people who don't have the budgets to upgrade the rooms and have these hard codecs are implementing bridging systems so just so they can make their Teams or their Zoom call, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to because everybody else in their network is using software, you know?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's the adoption that's going to happen here. I mean, like I said, there's going to be those niche use cases. I just think that the 90% use cases, that those are going to go away.
And again, I'm reading some of the chat here of how certain systems are having problems because of latest update from the from the provider, right? These are things that we're just going to have to deal with and try to play catch up. But and that's why sometimes hard codecs are the safer option. But also, how long are they going to be manufactured and supported, right? I mean, once these soft codecs become the norm, then there's no reason for the Polys and the Ciscos of the worlds to be supporting them anymore, and then you run into that issue, of not having the support for those. So it's kind of like people who still own VCRs are able to use them because they still work.
And you can see their technology is already shifting. Like
Yeah.
what they're starting to sell is shifting to accommodate the software type rooms. So
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
on that same topic, Gregory wants to know, will there be a replacement for hard codecs within a classified environment because he can't see how that's possible within restricted areas?
So that's the use case I'm talking about, right? Like that's the use case where those things are still going to be applicable and they're still going to be manufactured, right? There's still, you'll have manufacturers making things like that. They'll just be more expensive. If they're not already too expensive, they're going to be more expensive, right? Because it's just going to not be making as much of them. And that's just supply and demand, right? But again, there are those niche case environments, I think, where that's still going to be applicable 100%, where you don't want to be reliant on public internet and everything else. So,
what issues have you run into with installing/configuring Teams and Teams devices regarding security?
I dump that off to the client in any case I can, right? It's on you, because in all reality, it's up to their IT team to support the security parameters. I mean, and that's just me speaking as an AV systems integrator, right? I mean, we have to integrate with these things. I have to train my clients on their software, right? I'm not providing Teams or Zoom or anything like that, but I still have to train them on how to use it. So we have to be familiar with it. But as far as how that interops on their network, how the security works on the network, I mean, that's 99.9% of the time on them. However, I am finding that in some cases where the AV integrator, and we are an example of that, right? We also have a managed IT service team that handles the 365 accounts for people and all sort of stuff, right? So we are reliant on taking care of their cybersecurity and network management, right? So we have the few cases where companies like ours are fortunate enough to do that because we offer that service. But previously, before we did that type of service, and if you were just an AV integrator, you would be reliant solely on the IT team / whoever's providing managed services for your client or your end user, I think.
Actually, Tim has a question for us. He says, do you see pushback
Not
on the
allowed.
month? Yeah. Do you see pushback on the month-to-month costs for soft codecs versus capital expenditures for hard codec costs once per 5 to 7 years?
No, right? Because the IT departments are used to working in an OpEx type of environment, and they're the ones that have the budgets for these software systems that they are supporting. It's not the AV side. I don't think there's a lot of pushback on that, right? If anything, they're more open to that, right? This goes into a whole other snowball topic of AV as a service, right? Where we've talked for years about providing AV as a service where it's OpEx versus CapEx, right? So I personally I've had people request it, but nobody actually really execute and pull the trigger on it. I know there's people out there doing it, right? But from that standpoint, that's the IT teams driving that too, because they're the ones who understand that operational and service contracts and service-based, stuff is the way to do things. The AV world is still 30 years in the past on how you do that. And some clients still are very, very old school because they have old school AV teams, right? Where they're never going to do anything OpEx. It's always going to be with cap. So but the software will be op, right?
Hardware codecs, most hardware codec manufacturers had a maintenance contract.
I was just going to say, yep.
So it's really the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that maintenance fee. I was just going to say that I think it's a little more appetizing for them to just do it all as OpEx and not really have to do that big bang large cost if they can avoid it. So I can see why to finance procurement, it would be more appetizing to work out like as a service model as opposed to having to spend that, however much it is to purchase the large equipment, especially if you have a bulk order. So.
And last question, are you seeing bring your own device as a control solution that is touchless?
In my opinion, I would love to see that as a customer, but
yeah. As an end user, as an end user, you want to see that, right? But as an integrator, I still think we can achieve that, right? But there's back end programming that's happening, right? There's the sensing of connectivity, right? So you can have on your screen pop up a BYOD, whatever, connect to this web address, plug in this dongle, do whatever, right? And I think that having the smarts on the back end to sense that signal presence, to sense whatever it is, however you want to do that, and then so it automatically appears, stuff appears, and you've got this, and then you're just using your laptop or you're using your phone or whatever it is. It's easy to do. You want to make it easy to do for the end user, right? But there's still going to be something doing that. So I mean, I've seen it. I've successfully accomplished things like that before, where the end user is bringing in the laptop and they're controlling everything. You don't touch anything. It's all wireless. As long as you're not doing conferencing, you need a USB jack, right? You can achieve these things now. It just comes down to fundamentally thinking outside the box and reversing what you know about traditional AV and how that works. Right?
Sheuli, what about the security on that? Like with people bringing in their own devices, is that something you guys are allowing?
That's a good question. I think that as long as you're on the WTW network at the time, right, on your company's network while you're using this, if there's a way to lock that down, that's something that we would have to definitely, look at and speak to our, security InfoSec team about. There's no doubt there would have to be a lot of vetting involved, but I'm kind of looking at this from an end user perspective, a simplicity perspective, but there's no doubt that we couldn't just roll it out. We'd have to go through all the checks and balances to see that it meets our InfoSec team's requirements. But hopefully there would be a way to do that.
So thanks all for joining me today. And I did see there was a specific question for Troy. You can find him and the rest of Shure's team in their booth. So if you want to head to their booth and ask that question there, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer it. And you can find all of our experts in the Ask the Experts chat room after this, and they're happy to answer additional questions. Jason, where can people find you?
Yeah, so please visit the booth. Today, the Dell booth, we've got a number of displays, a lot of product information that you can check out. You can always email me, jason_vossler@dell.com, or feel free to visit our website, www.dell.com/monitors.
Troy?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Check me out there. Send me a message if you need me there. and happy to answer any questions.
Sheuli?
I'm on LinkedIn as well, Sheuli Forte.
Jeremy?
LinkedIn, Jeremy Caldera, or pearltechnology.com is our website. So.
And where can we find you on the Twitters?
Jeremy_Caldera. Not a space. That's someone else.
So speaking of Twitter, don't forget to tweet about the event using hashtag AV3 and hashtag AVTweets so you can win one of 3 $50 gift cards. Also be sure to head to our exhibit hall and check out exhibitors like Dell and Shure. Make sure you check in at all of the booths, chat with them, and you can be entered to win so many cool prizes like these headphones I'm wearing right now. Thanks for joining us.